Hey, what's up everybody, Nexel here. Today we are playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and I'm going to be showing you 3 different ways that you can creatively defeat the big bonus challenge for May. Now we do have 7 more days on this, so hopefully that's enough time for people to either find the medals they need or be able to enter a party that has the medals they need. So we do still have some time on this one. We will not be talking about the Gummy Golem. And the reason behind this is because the Gummy Golem doesn't give you any jewels. The main thing about big bonus challenges at the end of every month is that you are getting free jewels. You are getting free in-game currency, and that is always going to be the main appeal for these events. Now, I'm only going to be showing you round 7 multiple times, and remember that if it works on the last round, it should theoretically work on all the rounds that come before it. So hopefully, any one of these 3 strategies is going to help someone get those free 5,000 jewels by the end of the event. Now, as we go into our first setup, one of the main things to know is that the objective is complete without having to continue. That means you can use defensive setups, and that leads us into our first setup. Now, this one is going to be credited to my party member, Vexia. So the main idea behind this setup is that you use a Kingdom Hearts 3 Vexen, and that's actually enough to keep yourself well protected and decrease the enemy's strength enough so that you can survive turn after turn after turn. Remember that with the objective, because it doesn't say how many turns you have to beat it in, you can literally take up to 200 turns, up to 500 turns if you need to. So you can just keep going as long as you make sure you don't get knocked out. And the whole purpose behind Vexen is to make sure that you survive. So what does Vexen do? Vexen is a 2-turn buffer, and the first cast on your first turn is going to give you +7 general defense and +7 power defense, and then it will give the enemy -7 general strength and -7 power defense. This is great because the Margoyle, of course, is going to be a power enemy, and as a 2-turn buffer on that second turn, even without extra attack, even without any sort of defense boost, whatever, by that second turn, as long as you're able to keep casting him, you will get general defense +14, power defense +14, and then decrease the enemy's general strength by 14 and power strength by 14. And that's enough to actually just let you last the entire quest. So let's go ahead and show you this here. Now, one thing to know before we actually show you it is that you want to put him in the if it's your own Vexen, you want to put him in the very first slot before any sort of buffing, and you want to make sure he is not in a magic slot. The whole reason behind that is because remember, the enemy reflects reverse damage. Vexen, of course, is a reverse metal, but without any sort of buffing or without putting him in a magic slot, he won't be doing any meaningful amount of damage. Sure, the enemy will reflect the 4 hits that Vexen gives, but because he's so weak, it'll only reflect 1 damage. So let's go ahead and show you it all in action here. Okay, so let's activate our Vexen, and again, this starts our defensive train going. Now, the enemy does reflect some of that back, but again, it's so minimal because there's no buffing. He's not on a magic slot, so at this point, we just let this play out. Now, remember that with any sort of defensive setup, you want to keep track of, 1, your gauges, making sure you're continually restoring them, because if at any point you can't cast your defensive medal, then you can be in a lot of trouble, and it could mess up all of your work up until that point. The next thing you want to keep track of is counters. You want to make sure that you're not getting interrupted in the middle of your rotation. You don't want to get any sort of random debuffs or anything like that. So make sure that 1, you're always restoring your gauges, and 2, that you're keeping the enemy's counter up. Now, as you saw during that first turn, we got knocked out. And the reason behind that is because we only got +7 general defense and +7 power defense, and gave the enemy only -7 general defense and -7 power strength. Now, since Vexen again is a 2-turn buffer, we are now at, let's actually slow this down so you can see it a little more clearly. We are now at +14 general defense and +14 power defense, and the enemy is at -14 general strength and -14 power defense. Now, from this point onwards, the rest of it should just be a piece of cake. You just let the setup play itself. So remember, keep restoring those gauges, keep making sure that counter is up, and then the Vexen alone is going to take care of the entire mission for you. So we'll just let this play out, and then we'll just kind of show you at the end of this turn that we can survive. And remember, if you can survive, then you can take as much time as you need to. So at this point, you can go make dinner, you can go for a drive, you can go watch some TV, because the defensive setup is enough to just carry you all the way through. And as you saw there, we only got hit for 500 and what was it, 547 damage, which was clearly not enough to take us out. So remember, just keep casting that Vexen over and over, even without extra attack, even without defense boost max. Doesn't matter, that Vexen is going to be enough to take care of you. So as you can see here, we are decreasing the health slowly but surely, but again, it doesn't matter as long as we're decreasing it. So however long this takes you is going to be dependent on how much damage you can crank out every single turn. All right, I believe this is turn 4. Yep. So just remember that Vexen alone, you want to make sure if it's your own Vexen, first slot, no buffing. Make sure you're not using a magic setup because you don't want that Vexen to be the reason you get knocked out. Now, for the second setup, this one is going to be credited to Jock Foy, who was in my stream when we first did this, and he used someone else's Vexen, and essentially the idea behind it is that you use a non-magic setup. So the reason behind this is because, again, on the friend slot, it's going to have a multiplier, but you want to make sure that that Vexen is doing as little damage as possible, so that way it's not reflected at you and it's going to knock you out. So what I'm doing here, it's essentially the same as the first setup. Again, we're not buffing the Vexen up at all. We are going to be using the Vexen for defensive reasons. And the reason I'm using Kyrie A instead of the Kingdom Hearts 3 Nominate is just because Kyrie A restores 10 gauges as opposed to Nominate's 5. And like I was saying in the first defensive setup, you just want to make sure that you're taking care of your gauges. So let's go ahead and show you this setup here. Now, just a disclaimer, we are not going to get knocked out on the first turn like we did last time, and the reason behind that is because the friend medal that I'm sharing actually has defense boost 6 max, so it's a Vexen with defense boost 6 max, so we're not going to get knocked out on this first run here. So let's go ahead and get to the Vexen here. All right. Now we got our first cast of Vexen, and again, that's going to give us some buffs right now, some general defense buffing, some power defense buffing, give the enemy minus general strength and minus power defense. And then by that second turn, that's when the effect becomes the best, because then you get plus 14 general defense, plus 14 power defense, and give the enemy minus 14 general strength and minus 14 power strength. So let me just show you that it works, and we will head over into our final setup. All right, there you go. We just got dinged, literally just scratched, and as long as we keep decreasing that health counter progressively, you can take as many turns as you need to. So the main thing about using a friend Vexen is that you just don't in any way buff it up. You don't want to give it any sort of base magic strength or anything like that, because that can knock you out. All right, so we'll move on to our final setup, which is essentially just recovery buffing. Now remember that with recovery buffing, all you have to do is either get hit by reflection damage or decrease the enemy's count down to 0, and that's going to be enough to carry you over to the next turn. Once you carry over, you keep all the buffs that you had from the last turn. So it's a lot easier to show you this than just describe it here. So let's actually take care of this Meow Wow real fast here. All right, there we go. And we have to search for a medal, because unfortunately it's not a shared one for me, so we have to go look for a particular Kingdom Hearts 3 Aqua Supernova Plus version. Remember that with the friend medal, you can actually just keep doing this. You can keep resetting it until you find the medal that you need. So we're just going to keep resetting until we have the exact medal that we're looking for, and here it is. So we're going to be borrowing the Onion Knights Kingdom Hearts 3 Supernova Plus Aqua. Now, the idea behind the setup here is that the Nominate is used to buff us. The Ava is used for damage. The Aerith is just going to be to decrease the count by 5 for the enemy and to increase our magic metal strength by 2,500 every single turn. The Elsa is just going to be, again, for damage. The Lingering Will, again, for damage. And to copy the Kingdom Hearts 3 Aqua. Now remember that because Lingering Will is copying Kingdom Hearts 3 Aqua, both of those medals are going to decrease count. And the idea behind recovery buffing is that, again, we get that count down to 0, the enemy knocks us out, we come back with all our buffs, and we are stronger than we were last turn. But like I was saying, let's go ahead and just show you it all in action. Alright. So with recovery buffing, if you do it correctly, you can just cast all your supernovas on the first turn. So let's go ahead and just cast all of this. Let's make sure we're buffed up. And then we cast all of this. Just getting as much strength as we can out on the first turn. We're going to even cast that friend shared Kingdom Hearts 3 Aqua. Get ourselves our buffs back and just do it all over again. Alright, and from here on out, we should just be getting stronger as time goes on. So let's wait till we get that counter down to 0. Or at least right before it. Okay, so when we activate this Aqua, it's going to bring that blue counter down to 0. Keep in mind that right now we have 43,500 strength going towards magic metals. So we're going to go ahead and get ourselves knocked out, decreasing that blue counter down to 0. And then the counter attack knocks us out. But because our turn didn't end technically, we keep all the buffs from last turn. That's why you still see that we have 43,500 strength going to magic metals. So we just keep casting at this point. And then by the end of this turn, we'll have even more strength that carries over to the third turn. So with this, you're just essentially getting stronger every single turn. And that means the amount of damage you're putting out every single turn is greater than the last turn. So let's see how much strength we have before we go ahead and start our third turn. So now we're sitting at 59,000 strength going to magic metal. So let's go ahead and cast this last Aqua here. That brings the countdown to 0. We get knocked out by the counterattack, and we come back with all of that strength. So let's go ahead and, again, just knock them out. Now, there's a few things to be mindful of when it comes to actually doing recovery buffing. The first thing is that the enemy's wing attack actually will poison you. So to some extent, you want to make sure you have poison resist 100% somewhere. That's why I have that empty slot there, because I know my Kingdom Hearts 3 Nominee has poison resist plus 40%, but if you need to add some sort of random metal, doesn't matter which one, as long as it's not like a reverse metal that'll knock you out, you can add a poison resist 100% metal on that first slot, that empty one that I'm not showing you anything there. So the wing attack will cast poison on you, and poison and recovery buffing don't work out well, because once you recover, you get knocked out with poison. So make sure that if you're going to be using recovery buffing, you have some form of poison protection there. The next thing is that if you are using reverse copy metals that have supernova on them, you can actually just use the supernova attack to knock yourself out with the reflection from the Margoyle's reverse reflection. So that's another means of doing recovery buffing. So I actually just want to show you. So let's actually just get out of this one. And as you can see, by the end of it all, we were at 73,500 strength going to magic metal. So recovery buffing is very, very, very strong. All right, so let me just show you how to use recovery buffing really, really quickly with reflection attacks. So if we go, let's say we're using this setup. Why not? So let's say something goes wrong with the counters, you miscalculate or something like that, and you need to find a way to recovery buff. If you use copy metals that are reverse, what you can do is once you get to the end of the rotation, so let's go ahead and get all the way towards the end here. Let's skip these second form Soras just to illustrate our point. So we are at this point where we're like, shoot, we didn't decrease the counter down to 0 enough. We actually made it go too high. You can use the supernova attack of the reverse metal just to knock yourself out, because it'll do damage. That damage gets reflected. You get knocked out in the middle of your own turn, and then you keep the buffs. So that's another way to do recovery buffing in case you're using like 2 copy metals that are reverse and have supernova attacks. So with that being said, those are my 3 strategies. So again, you can use your own Vexen, you can use a friend Vexen, and then you can also just use recovery buffing to make yourself stronger every single turn. Now, one thing I do want to point out before we close out the video here is that for the rest of this month, we actually have boosters. So remember that the big bonus challenge lasts for 7 more days, but the boosters only last for 2 more days. So if we go back to our quest here, and let's see, it should still be here. Here you go. This reverse appreciation campaign. So if you haven't done this already, do this first because it's going to make that big bonus challenge a lot easier. Because remember that boosters give all of your medals strength. So in this case, we got like a generic plus 30% booster for all medals. So as you can see here, there's the booster. There's the booster. And the booster is just going to make it a lot easier to do this quest. So I recommend if you haven't done the big bonus challenge right now, you finish it before the end of the month, before the boosters go away. But with that being said, that's the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer when I have the time. If you'd like to join my Discord for some off-hours help, go ahead and join right down there in the yellow box. Just type it into your URL exactly as it's written there, and you should be good to go. But that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take it easy.